It was a humid Friday night in New York City, the kind of night when people were restless, loud, and careless. The neon lights of bars and clubs bled into the streets, mixing with the honking horns of traffic. Among all the chaos, a yellow taxi rolled slowly down 8th Avenue. Inside was Frank Dalton, a man in his late 50s with graying hair under faded Yankees cap. He looked like an ordinary cab driver, calm, a little tired, someone who blended into the city's endless background. But Frank was anything but ordinary. Unknown to the people he drove every night, Frank was a retired Army intelligence operative, a man who had spent decades in shadowy corners of the world, training, hunting, and surviving missions the government would never admit existed. He had taken bullets, buried friends, and learned to read people faster than they could blink. And when he finally walked away, he wanted nothing more than peace. Driving a cab was his way to fade into normal life. No one asked questions, no one looked twice. That peace, however, was fragile. At around midnight, Frank picked up 3 young men outside a nightclub in Hell's Kitchen. They were loud before they even got in, shoving each other and laughing, reeking of cheap whiskey and weed. The first one who slid into the front seat wore a red hoodie and a gold chain that flashed under the streetlights. His name was Tyrell Banks, though Frank wouldn't know that yet. The other 2 piled into the back, Rico and Dante, both rowdy and clearly itching for trouble. "Yo, old man, take us up to Harlem," Tyrell said, tossing a crumpled 20 into the front seat like it was trash. Frank glanced at him in the mirror. His instincts told him everything. These weren't just drunk kids. Their eyes had that sharp, restless gleam. They weren't satisfied with just partying. They were hunting for someone weaker to push around. "Harlem, huh?" Frank said calmly, putting the cab into gear. "All right, buckle up." They didn't buckle up. Instead, Rico leaned forward from the back, tapping Frank's shoulder repeatedly. "Yo, why you driven a cab, man? You too old for this crap. Bet you broke as hell." Laughter filled the cab. Tyrell smirked, pulling out his phone and aiming it at Frank. "Hey Dante, look at this. Grandpa over here hustling for gas money. Say something, old man, so I can post this." Frank's hands stayed steady on the wheel. He had been mocked before by people far scarier than these boys, but his jaw tightened slightly. He didn't like being touched, didn't like the camera in his face. He breathed slow, steady breaths, reminding himself, "Stay calm, they're just kids." But they kept going. Rico opened a bottle of liquor and spilled some intentionally on the seat. Dante kicked the back of Frank's chair hard enough to jolt him forward. "You like that, huh? Drive faster, Grandpa, or maybe you scared," Dante taunted, laughing. Tyrell leaned close, whispering just loud enough for Frank to hear. "Bet if I smacked you right now, you wouldn't do a damn thing." That line was the one that made Frank's chest tighten. His instincts, trained over decades, started to whisper. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. 3 young men, drunk but not sloppy, mean but not smart. They didn't know what kind of man was behind the wheel. They thought he was just another cabbie they could disrespect for laughs. Frank didn't answer them. Instead, he made a slow left turn, taking a route only he knew. A darker street, away from the main lights, quieter. His voice was calm, almost too calm when he finally spoke. "You boys really want to find out what happens when you insult the wrong man." They laughed even harder, not realizing that the air inside the cab had shifted. The laughter inside the taxi grew louder, bouncing off the windows, but Frank's silence had begun to unsettle them. Tyrell lowered his phone, frowning. Something about the way the old man's eyes stayed fixed on the road, cold and steady, didn't sit right. "Yo, why you talkin' this street?" Dante asked suddenly, looking around. The road was darker, lined with shuttered shops and graffiti-smeared walls. Hardly any traffic passed through. "Shortcut," Frank said, his voice low and even. Rico smirked and leaned back. "Man, I ain't scared. Jude's just trying to get us there faster. Right, old man?" But Tyrell wasn't laughing anymore. He studied Frank's profile, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel, not the nervous twitch of a cabbie afraid of trouble, but the steady control of someone who had been through storms before. "Hey," Tyrell said, his voice harder now. "Pull over, I don't like this route." Frank didn't answer. He kept driving, turning down another side street, even darker than the last. "Yo, you deaf," I said, "pull the hell over," Tyrell barked, his hands suddenly reaching for Frank's shoulder. And that's when it happened. Before Tyrell's hand could land, Frank's right arm shot out, faster than the boys could process. He clamped down on Tyrell's wrist with iron strength, twisting it just enough to make him wince. With his left hand, Frank kept the wheel perfectly steady. "You lay another hand on me," Frank said, his voice calm but razor sharp, "and you won't be using it again. Understood?" The cab fell silent. Tyrell yanked his hand back, rubbing it, his bravado crumbling for a second. Rico and Dante leaned forward, confused, their drunken confidence wobbling. "Man, what the hell was that?" Dante muttered. Frank's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. His stare was enough to freeze both of them. "I've broken men twice your size with less effort than it takes to snap a twig. Don't test me." For a moment, none of them knew what to say. This wasn't the reaction they expected. Cab drivers were supposed to be weak, easy targets for a few jokes, or maybe worse. But this one spoke like someone who had been through wars and carried no fear of them. Tyrell tried to shake it off. He laughed, but his voice cracked. "Man, you ain't scarin' nobody. You just some crazy old dude driven a cab." Frank gave a small, humorless chuckle. "Crazy old dude. Maybe, but I've slit throats in the dark while the world slept. I've watched men beg for mercy with their last breath. So if you think I'm just another cabbie, by all means keep pushing me." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Rico shifted nervously, looking at Dante, who suddenly seemed a lot less bold. Tyrell, though, still tried to save face, his pride too big to back down in front of his friends. "You think you tough, huh? You think we scared?" he snapped, though his voice trembled slightly. "Man, I could put you down right now." Frank pulled the cab to a slow stop. They weren't in Harlem anymore. They weren't even close. Instead, the car sat on the edge of an abandoned industrial block near the Hudson River, quiet except for the distant hum of the city. Frank turned in his seat for the first time, his eyes cold and unblinking. "Boys, you don't know scared yet." Tyrell opened his mouth to fire back, but Frank moved again, swift, precise. In one motion, he reached under his seat and pulled out a heavy flashlight, swinging it just close enough to stop inches from Tyrell's face. The sudden burst of speed made all three of them flinch. "Lesson 1, Frank said quietly. "Always know who you're picking a fight with, because sometimes it's the wrong man." The three of them froze. Rico swallowed hard, the sound loud in the silence. Dante's bravado drained completely, his eyes darting between his friends. For the first time, they were beginning to understand that the man in front of them wasn't bluffing. And Frank, he was just getting started. The cab sat idling in the shadows, its engine humming softly against the silence. Tyrell, Rico, and Dante no longer laughed. The liquor haze that had fueled their bravado seemed to burn off under the weight of Frank's icy stare. Tyrell was the first to try and recover. "Man, you ain't gonna do nothin', you just tryin' to scare us." He forced a chuckle, but even he could hear the weakness in it. Frank leaned back slowly, setting the flashlight on the dashboard with deliberate calm. "Boys," he said, "I spent 20 years overseas. Covert operations. You think I don't know how to scare people? Scaring is easy. Surviving, that's the real trick." Rico shook his head nervously. "Yo, Ty, maybe we should just get another cab. This dude's off his rocker." But Tyrell wasn't ready to lose face. Pride was all he had, and he wasn't about to let two friends see him fold to some old cabbie. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a pocket knife, flipping it open with a snap. "You think we scared? Try me, Grandpa," Tyrell hissed, the blade catching the faint glow of the dashboard. Frank's eyes narrowed. He'd seen bigger knives, deadlier weapons, and far worse men try to end him. A cheap pocket knife in the hands of a jittery thug didn't impress him. He tilted his head, his tone calm, almost mocking. "Rule number 1, Frank said softly. Never pull a blade on someone who knows how to use it better than you." Before Tyrell could react, Frank's hand shot forward. In a flash of movement, he twisted Tyrell's wrist, forcing the knife out of his grip and onto the floor. Tyrell yelped in pain, clutching his arm as Frank held him in a controlled lock. Dante cursed and lunged forward from the back seat, but Frank was ready. He slammed his elbow backward with brutal precision, catching Dante in the chest and knocking the wind out of him. Dante stumbled back, gasping, clutching his ribs. Rico froze, eyes wide, caught between helping his friends and staying out of it. In seconds, the balance of power had shifted. 3 young men, drunk and dangerous minutes ago, were now trembling in the presence of someone they couldn't comprehend. Frank released Tyrell, who collapsed against the seat, groaning. Then Frank leaned in close, his voice deadly calm, almost like he was teaching a lesson. "You think this city is yours to terrorize. You think cab drivers, shopkeepers, old men on the corner, they're easy prey. But let me tell you something. You never know who you're really messing with. Some of us have seen blood. Some of us have ended lives for less reason than you gave me tonight. And the only reason you're walking out of this car alive is because I'm done with that life." His words cut deeper than any blade. Rico stared at him, his bravado broken, whispering, "Yo, man, we're sorry, we ain't know." Frank gave a cold, humorless smile. "That's the problem, you never know." He threw the knife out the window into the dark street, then put the cab in gear. Without another word, he drove them back toward the bright, crowded lights of Harlem. The boys sat in silence, none daring to speak again. When he pulled over on 125th Street, Frank unlocked the doors. "Get out," he said simply. They stumbled out, shaken, their swagger gone. Tyrell, holding his wrist, looked back once like he wanted to say something, but the words never came. They melted into the crowd, just 3 more faces swallowed by the city. Frank sat in the cab for a moment, breathing steady, watching the rearview mirror as they disappeared. Then he reached up, adjusted his Yankees cap, and pulled back onto the street. Another fare, another night. To anyone else, he was just another taxi driver. But somewhere deep inside, the soldier, the spy, the man trained to kill, he was still there. Quiet, waiting. And if the world ever forgot, it only took one wrong insult to remind them.